Bank Studios. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here, and the reactions from heads of state are coming in, including our Israeli allies. Here's what Bibi had to say about the decision Trump made to move forward.
And it makes a huge difference. And I can tell, I'm talking to America's allies in the region, just one by one by one. And I can't quote from these conversations, but I can tell you they all share this, and they all say, thank God that Donald Trump is here. Thank God that the two of you are acting together to remove this threat, not only to you, but to us.
And it's not just America's allies in the Middle East that Bibi was referencing. It's also America's allies in NATO, according to NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte.
First of all, say that my thoughts are with the service members, the U.S. service members who made the ultimate sacrifice over the last couple of days. And let me also say that the commander-in-chief, the leader of the free world, President Donald J. Trump, I really commend what is happening here. Taking out Khamenei, taking out the nuclear capability in Iran, but also taking out the ballistic missile program in Iran. This is crucial. And what I see in Europe, I spoke with all the key European leaders over the weekend, is widespread support for what the president is doing, and also making sure that when it comes to logistics, access, defending key U.S. interests in Europe and in the region, the Europeans are really stepping up.
Yeah, it seems like there's a pretty good coalition of support behind the choice that President Trump made in conjunction with the Israelis. Basically, just mostly college-educated suburban white women seem to be opposed to this, and that's about it, which I can live with. For more on this, please be joined by Liel Leibovitz, editor-at-large for Tablet, also host of the Rootless podcast. Liel, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Pleasure as always.
So the increasing isolation of Iran, something that essentially Trump has been pursuing methodically and maybe unbeknownst to the now departed Iranian senior leaders since his first term with the Abraham Accords.
Yes. I think it's more than merely the isolation of Iran. I think what we're seeing right now is that for the last 40 or 50 years, we have been living in a kind of bizarro Twilight Zone reality in which we listen to this belligerent country calling the United States the Great Satan, calling Israel the Little Satan, killing 244 United States Marines in the attack in Lebanon, attacking the USS Cole, threatening to assassinate the American president, planning assassinations of dissidents on American soil. And nobody does anything until Donald Trump comes along and says, guys, America is winning. It has to protect its national interests. It has to take action. It will not be cowed by, a little backward republic in the Middle East that threatens its national interest by threatening, for example, to shut the Straits of Hormuz and curtail 1/3 of all global energy supply to the West. Guys, we're going to do what America does, which is fight for America's interest. God bless.
The Iraq trap that Walter Russell Mead writes about, Trump needs to avoid the Iraq trap. I mean, there's not the endless war piece of it, although there's some aspect to it. I think that's been effectively addressed by Trump and others, Vance, Hegseth, Rubio. But here's what Walter Russell Mead writes. He must negotiate the gap between two outcomes. Any agreement he reaches with the mullahs must differ visibly from President Obama's nuclear deal, and any Middle East war he fights must be dramatically shorter and more successful than the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. By denying the American president a diplomatic victory, the Iranians provoked him to launch a war. They hope the war, as costly as it has been and will be for them, will destroy Mr. Trump in due course because WRM argues the political coalition could fray if it goes on very long. The munitions of America can be diminished if air superiority is required for an extended period of time. And so it may be more precarious than it looks after the first few days.
So look, I think, first of all, Walter Russell Mead is almost always right on almost everything, and he correctly points out that these two, twin evils of, on the one hand, Barack Obama's disastrous capitulation to the mullahs, and on the other hand, George W. Bush's disastrous handling of the Iraq War, should be avoided at all costs. But I think Donald Trump understands something even more profound, and his actions really help him bypass these two traps. A lot of people are asking right now, we just don't understand, what is the goal of this war? Is it regime change? What is it? The point I think that Trump understands, which used to be kind of like commonsensical up until, very, very smart people in academia started talking about these things 30 or 40 years ago, is that you don't have to have a quote-unquote, just kind of like goal for the war. The goal for the war was to collapse the regime that repeatedly threatened America's national security interests. Kill as many bad guys as you can. Anyone who's ever watched the 80s action movie understands the logic of this, because the second guy, the third guy, the eighth guy that comes into power, he's not going to be able to threaten you quite as effectively. If the Iranian people rise and get, a brand new regime, that's great, but that's their interest. America definitely has the capacity to achieve all of its strategic goals and, again, ensure its national security interests without repeating the disastrous mistakes of the past.
I want to get your reaction to something that Marco Rubio said yesterday about the timing of the attack, because that has also, of course, come under scrutiny and criticism. Take a listen.
Assessment that was made that if we stood and waited for that attack to come first before we hit them, we would suffer much higher casualties. And so the president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act. Going back to the purpose. The purpose of this is to destroy that missile capability. Why does Iran want that ballistic missile capability? What they are trying to do and have been trying to do for a very long time is build a conventional weapons capability as a shield where they can hide behind.
On the issue of the preemptive strike because Israel was going to launch, it's being received in some quarters like like Israel and the United States weren't coordinating. But I took that as in fact they were coordinating and the decision had been made and it was synchronized accordingly.
You're absolutely correct, Dan. Look, you mentioned before that only white, suburban college-educated women oppose this war. If only it were so. I think we're seeing a lot of voices. We have the woke left. I think we're seeing a lot of voices from the woke right kind of saying, hey, here, listen to Rubio. He's admitting that we're only fighting Israel's war. I think, as you said correctly just now, what Rubio is actually saying about the timing and kind of design of this war is that the president finally understands, which, again, should have been common sense to all of his predecessors, that the best way to avoid sacrificing American dollars and, God forbid, American lives is for America to have really great, capable regional allies that could fight its own wars while also defending America's national security interests. And if you have those with, thank God for a country like Israel, with supremely advanced technological and military capabilities, then you go to these operations together and you make sure that you have allies doing a lot of your work for you, which is exactly what a renewed Monroe Doctrine should look like.
Yeah, and the woke left critiques though too. I mean, they're really sort of in a box of their own making. I mean, the one hand you can't decry and this is the point John Fetterman made. It's like, what is this? Israel has a right to exist, and the Iranians are a fanatical rogue regime and the leading state sponsor of terror. Okay, so do you want to do something about it? I mean, and if somebody does something about it to change that dynamic in the Middle East and basically across the globe, then you're going to criticize them for moving against a regime as you described it. I mean, they don't really have any space, so they're coming up with these. It could have been earlier, it should have been later. Give peace a chance. I mean, all this stuff that really doesn't have any substantive basis.
It's not just that. I think it goes even further. Look, it's almost impossible to look at the operation in Iran without remember that Iran is a key linchpin part of the so-called axis of resistance, which is, of course, dominated by our real global foe or rival, which is China.
Right.
I think that removing Iran from the chessboard is a tremendously necessary American strategic move for a conflict or a confrontation we already know we're going to have with Beijing. This is what great statesmen like Bibi Netanyahu and Donald Trump think like. They understand this logic. Here at home, sadly, we have, a chorus of critics just kind of, chattering along, saying, as you said, all kinds of things like, oh, maybe Congress should have looked at it first, which, again, tell that to Barack Obama and his war-starting, proclivities. Maybe, we should have thought about it more. Maybe. As Theodore Roosevelt said, the man in the arena acts, and thank God for Donald J. Trump.
And what do you think the impact of this? I mean, part of it is difficult to tell, as we don't know how this is going to play out ultimately, but the potential positive impact on the larger effort to establish, through the Board of Peace, rebuilt Gaza and peaceful coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians. How does what's happening here impact that, and maybe perhaps positively?
Look, as you said, it's hard to tell, but here's one very, very hopeful sign. The hopeful sign is that the Iranians went ahead and did just about the dumbest thing that they could have done, which is attack everybody. They attacked the Saudis, the Bahrainis, they attacked the Qataris, they're great kind of allies. I think what you're seeing with the removal of this malignant regional force, which was only allowed to prevail because Barack Obama literally airdropped pallets with billions of dollars to build up and prop up this regime and its regional dominance. Paltry little regime exposed for what it really is, a ridiculous bunch of benighted losers. Everyone in the region is looking around and saying, oh, actually, all of our interests are aligned. We don't really care about the quote-unquote Palestinians, which are just a bunch of, terror-loving genociders who no one ever really took seriously, just as a sort of cudgel in diplomatic negotiations. Now we have a strong and, enforced Israel. We have the United States. All of our interests are aligned. There's absolutely no reason for us not to collaborate and cooperate regionally, which in the long run, I think will be tremendous for peace and, sustainable kind of relationship in the region.
Well, and it may provide an opportunity to further defenestrate Iranian proxies like Hezbollah. The Hezbollah's Lebanese parliament leader, he got nixed yesterday after Hezbollah began attacking Israel with rockets. That was a curious choice by Hezbollah. But anyway, the point is that if you bring Iranian proxies into this too, then they get diminished as well.
I completely agree. And look, what we're really seeing, I think, very, very clearly, which kind of boggles the Western mind, because we tend to think of, rational actors making rational choices based on discernible, clearly discernible, interests. We're actually seeing that these regimes, Iran, Lebanon, Hezbollah, etc., are just a host of suicidal maniacs. Why would Hezbollah join this fight in its significantly diminished capacity as it's seeing Israel, decimate its, paymaster in Tehran? Why would you join the fight unless your really only goal is just to die as a martyr? It's insane. But they're doing the same thing again and again and again, and seeing the same defeats again and again and again. I think they just want to die.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, we're seeing from you posted about this, the Iranian Independent Filmmakers Association, all of these rallies in big cities around the country over the weekend. We're seeing that Iranians and not to mention, of course, the protests on the streets of Tehran last month, but we're seeing that that Iranians want to live and live free, and that's encouraging too. That's the most encouraging part about it.
Tell that to our mayor in New York City, Zoran Mamdani, who basically declared a national day of mourning when Ayatollah Khamenei was eliminated, because, of course, Baldwin College progressive liberals from the West know much better than the brave Iranians fighting in the street what's best for Iran. It's a farce.
It really is. I mean, and I'm sure you saw too the obits in the New York Times and the Washington Post for Khomeini. It was like, it was reminiscent of the New York Times glowing profile of Hitler as a Bavarian gentleman who likes to do walk with his dogs. I mean, right. I'm sorry for your loss, Mamdani, and New York Times and Washington Post.
A nice vegetarian painter who made Germany great again. It's unbelievable. Like, literally, the Washington Post, to those of your listeners who haven't had the pleasure, wrote something like Khomeini, a kindly old man with a twinkle in his eye and a lovely smile. Guys, this is the number one enemy of America who killed hundreds of Americans and threatens to continue and do it repeatedly. What are you doing?
Well, Liel, you're always focused on the bad stuff with him. What about the good stuff, his good qualities? Can't you accentuate the positive? His hobbies, his avocations, his favorite authors.
Look, there are media critics out there
who absurd.
Are giving guff to Barry Weiss from CBS News for, and I'm not making this up, taking the American position over the Iranian. Guys, CBS News is an American media organization. Obviously, we should root for America.
Boy, it's, this is not funny stuff, but it really is theater of the absurd with the left. It really is.
Clarifying. It's a clarifying moment in time.
Liel Leibovitz, editor-at-large for Tablet, host of the Rootless podcast. Liel, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
And he joined us on Chicago's Morning Answer.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
The following is a paid political announcement.
There's one thing I really want to say to Donald Trump. If you come for my people, you come through me.